Once again, it is time to recklessly speculate on a future wrestling game. That's right, what's good internet? My name is Attack Slug, and this is my expectations and predictions for WWE 2K23. We are potentially 6 months away from a brand new WWE game, and that means it's time for me to sit down, write things down, and talk them out and what I think might be, could be, and more importantly, should be in the next iteration of the 2K franchise. And I say potentially because we don't know. If they follow the usual yearly franchise goals, then we should see a new game in March of 2023. If things aren't going as well as they should be, I could certainly see a delay until October of 2023. But as I currently record this in October of 2022, we don't have that information just yet. But usually, 6 months before, I'll do a video like this for each and every game if it happens or not. And so let's run down what I think could be the most likely scenario for 2K23. Number 1, the gameplay I expect to be mostly unchanged from 2K22. We all know the history, that 2K20, absolute trash fire. They had to take a year off, there was the COVID thing, and they came back with a mostly solid game in 2K22. That I don't think will be changed all that much on the gameplay front. If there is one thing I could beg for, it is please don't change the controls again. Like, I don't want to have to relearn controls again. Find a scheme and stick with it for at least a couple of years. But outside of all of the basic controls and little flourishes here and there, I would like to see an overhaul to the animations of the weapon systems. Because right now it is just different skins on pretty much the same thing. I think that hitting someone with a hockey stick and a baseball bat should animate differently. That'd be nice. I always want more options for tables and stairs and chairs and just not the same static things they've been doing for year after year after year. Let me get a little bit more creative in how human flesh meets solid steel. But moving on to match types. Now, I know with the fact that we have War Games coming up at Survivor Series in November, a lot of folks are going to say, hey, is it finally time for War Games to be in these video games? And the last couple times that didn't happen, and I don't expect it to happen now, even being on the main roster this time. Only because I just don't see this engine being able to handle the 2 rings, and the cage, and like the 10 guys, and the having to go from ring to ring as a whole different set of animations going to be needed there, and to have all that be in there and not break, I just don't see it being feasible. Now, if you wanted to make the argument that, hey, the power of the PS5 should be able to do that, yeah, but can the team accomplish that in the time remaining? I'd say probably no. And of course, there are all kinds of match types I'd like to see return. Inferno match, buried alive, ambulance match. Like, there are all kinds of things they could be doing that they haven't been doing for a couple of years now. And for me, top of the list is always bring back special guest referee. It shouldn't be that hard, you guys. I've been saying that since they had that Daniel Bryan, Triple H guest ref thing in a showcase mode. I haven't put it in the game yet. Like, what's the holdup? But speaking of Xbox Series X and the PS5, yes, 2K22 did appear on those platforms, and it was the first time on that generation of consoles. So personally, I gave him a little bit of a pass on how those games performed on those consoles, but this time is your second game on PS5 and Xbox Series X. Therefore, there should be no excuse for any kind of longish load times. I want to see just lightning quick load times on those SSDs. I understand you also have to play these games on PS4 and Xbox One. I get that, and you're being hamstrung by previous console generations. But optimize and make sure that when I'm playing through a My Rise mode, the load times are insignificant because you have those very, very fast hard drives. But moving on to who will be on the cover of 2K23, is there any other option really besides the Bloodline? Is there any other major star, major story in the past 2 years of the company bigger than Roman and the Usos, and now Solo Sikoa and Sami Zayn? Just Roman, front and center, Bloodline, behind him, wise man. all that. Like, what other real option do you have for the cover of the game? And I know Roman was already on half the cover of 2K20. Let's forget that ever happened and give me a Bloodline cover, because if you want to sell actual copies way more than any other game, your only other real option, and wrestling fans, you're gonna hate this, would be Logan Paul. I don't want it, you don't want it, but that would sell copies way more than anybody else in that company, bar none. And it's like, should we see a McIntyre on a cover? Sure. Should we see a Seth freaking Rollins on the cover? Sure. But come on. It's Roman, and the Bloodline is the option there. But what does that mean for any potential special edition if we have one? Because 2K22 only had a digital-only NWO edition that I didn't buy. If you're charging me 120 bucks, I want a physical boxed thing. Come on. And if they manufacture one of those, and if we see the return that looks very, very likely at this point of one Bray Wyatt, then certainly a Bray Wyatt Firefly Funhouse and or whatever else he's doing now, special edition box would be the thing to do. And granted, any combination of these options on either of those things would make sense. Like if you had Bray on the cover and a Bloodline special edition, if you had Drew on the cover and had a Logan Paul special edition, like all these options are interchangeable, but it really depends on how things go. And I'm filming this before Extreme Rules, so if Bray returns, I haven't seen it yet. And also, if Bray returns, I can see him being the pre-order bonus going into that edition. Because again, usually 6 months before is the cutoff date for any new superstars in the game. And I think that some of y'all are going to end up being DLC that returned very recently, like the Garganos or Braun Strowman, Dexter Lumis. Like that's all very recent, and that could end up being a DLC type situation when the game comes out next March. If it's out next March. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about here, and that is the modes in the game and how you can improve them in 2K23. Number one being My Rise. Used to be My Career, used to be other things in this franchise, but I thought finally they did the thing fans have wanted for a long time, which was separate men's and women's My Careers, My Rise, so kudos on doing that. But of course, nothing is perfect, and there are more things that we could have used in this My Career. Number one being, yeah, they said you have 100 stories. Problem was, most of them were like a minute of dialogue, a match, and that was it. Not enough unique cutscenes, not enough more grandiose stories being told in the My Rise. And that is just a matter of manpower. That is a matter of having folks there to animate even more of these cutscenes that actually mean something in the scope of these stories and rivalries. And so the ones that they did focus on that were big stories were pretty good. The problem is, there just weren't enough of them. And also, because of the non-linear nature of how this My Rise played out, you didn't really have a satisfying ending to it. You had a checklist, you finished that checklist, did all the stories, and that was the end. And it's like, there's a way around that. There was a way to do, alright, save one big final epic story that actually concludes the career for the end. Make you do everything else first, and then once all other stuff is done, then unlock the final story to cap off your My Rise career. It is not a hard problem to solve, and hopefully they solve it in 2K23. Which brings me to My GM, a mode that was finally reintroduced in 2K22, and my number one demand for that mode is very simple. Expand, expand, expand. They launched that thing super bare bones. They patched it once to add in the tag team titles and more matches in the actual cards, but otherwise mostly left things alone, and I would hope that in a future game like 2K23, you'd have things like mid-card titles. You would have more match types being able to be used. You'd have multi-man, handicap, all that stuff. It was just way too limited and way too bare bones, and all they really gotta do is just expand it, like look to old games, add in more options of what those old games had, and further what they're doing with that mode. Personally, I thought locking in the class things for having the classes have to fight each other, and you couldn't really do the ones you wanted to do for matches. Like if you wanted to have Brock and Roman, that was a class, it didn't really work, so like, don't do that. Or at least find a way to mitigate that particular issue. But I think that having a better reward in giving a variety of the matches during a rivalry would work way better, and don't allow me to book a tag team match that starts up a new tag team rivalry when the whole point is that there are two guys that are feuding in singles that are in that match. What I mean is, if I have John Cena feuding with Seth Rollins, and I want to have them in a tag team and say, oh, how can they coexist? That is certainly a long-standing trope in wrestling. Then I don't want them in a match with the Usos, and all of a sudden it's a John Cena and Rollins versus the Usos feud. No. It's still a John Cena-Rollins feud. Reward me in having a better variety in that rivalry. It wasn't a terrible start, you just need more. Which brings me to my faction. And I'll be honest, I don't care. But what I expect is putting that mode online versus other players, and having you incentivized towards more predatory monetization and locking even more superstars behind that My Faction mode. This has been the game they have patched the most post-release, and they're only still patching it because they're adding more characters into My Faction to lock in that mode. And I think if you actually allowed players to unlock those models for use in the rest of the game, the complaints would perhaps go away. They're going to make it more of a grind to try and get more of your money, and that's just not what I do. And that brings me to the black sheep of the 2K modes, which is indeed Universe mode. And just make it work. Like, just stop breaking it. Stop having save files get corrupted. Like, just fix the mode. Granted, I don't think they're going to actually add anything to this mode, but please, just fix it at least. My prediction is little to no updates for Universe mode. Sad, but true. And I guess finally, tying back into your potential cover star would be your Showcase mode. We know 2K loves those Showcase modes. The problem is, it's getting very, very hard with all of the talent that perhaps has left and come back and whatever else with AEW in, okay, we have a Showcase, but who could we actually get and fight in that Showcase? If you did Roman, then big gaps there without the Shield is a problem. If you had Edge, big gaps there in his whole tag team career with Christian are a problem. And now, more than any other time in history, when you think of the last 20 or so years in things you could do, how many of those big storylines involved Vincent Kennedy McMahon? And is he persona non grata in the game, like in the company? Will this game have any Vince at all? Will they ban you from uploading Vince to the community creations like a certain rabid Wolverine? It is all very, very curious at this point. I think in terms of new modes, I don't expect to create a story. I don't know what else you even do here for new modes in a wrestling game, but I'm open to ideas. I think you will have the same exact announce team of Cole and Byron and Graves, but I will say one positive for launching in March and locking in your content in October means that now, when they have those season premieres and change up their set design, you can actually have those new sets when the game comes out instead of being outdated by a year as usual. Because it seemed like every year, game in October, and then the draft, and then new set designs for Raw and SmackDown, and then, man, what are you gonna do, right? And so that's it for me in this video. Here's hoping the game is officially announced and confirmed soon, and hopefully it is in a March time frame if it's gonna be good. Because if it's broken, then please just delay it. Now, what does that mean for any potential AEW game in that time frame? Nobody knows. But what I do know is that I'll be here doing videos and covering them, so stick around, get subbed. See you then. I'm Attack Slug. More videos on this channel. I'll see you next time, and I'm out.